Hey guys, today we are thrilled to have an incredible guest on, Miss Terrin Ammar. Terrin is the founder of the Queen Kollective, a certified trauma-informed practitioner, business professional, and mentor who has dedicated her life to empowering women to heal their trauma and embrace their feminine confidence. In this episode, Terrin and I are going to go into the insights on understanding and balancing masculine and feminine dynamics. We'll explore how to recognize which energy you're leading with, practical steps to achieve polarity, and the impact of trauma on these energies. Join us right now for an enlightening conversation filled with personal stories, expert advice, and actionable strategies. Whether you're looking to balance your energies, step into your power, or simply understand yourself better, this episode is packed with valuable insights that you won't want to miss. Hey, Terrin, welcome to Life Without Secrets.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you so much.
I know, I am so excited too. I feel like it's been like a few months for us to get on here, but I'm so grateful because I feel like this is just such a topic I really actually want to explore deeper into my own life. And so I know I can't be the only one. And so I'm so excited to dive into what you do. I think it's so profound, like learning about the masculine and feminine energies, what those are. So, if you don't mind, we'll just kind of jump into that topic, and then we will just be probably sharing stories along the way because I know I can relate to everything that you talk about. So why don't we start with what does it mean to have a masculine or a feminine energy? I think these are words that are passed around a lot lately, but I don't know that people typically really understand what that means. I've heard people say oh, you have both, and well, what does one look like over the other? When do you operate in one versus the other? So how can we recognize those energies? What does it mean? What do those look like or feel like in relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness, my favorite topic of all time. Because I'm like, how much time do we have? We might be
I love it.
honestly, well, it truly is a passion of mine just because it's exactly what I needed. When I discovered this, it literally changed my life. It changed my relationships, not only with others, but with myself, to understand how I operated for such a long time, especially in relationships. So just to give an overview, I guess, of masculine and feminine energy, because honestly, it can, especially using the word energy, some people are like, that's kind of a scary, weird word. Like, what energy? But it's looking through the lens of just opening your heart and your eyes to this concept is just really beautiful. Because I will tell you, we talked about this before the podcast. I grew up on a farm. If there's anyone who would be opposed to masculine, feminine energy, being like, oh, that's too woo woo, it would be me. Because I grew up the farm girl, conservative, small town. I'm the 1997 Friendly Junior Rodeo Queen.
I love it. Woohoo.
No, but honestly, it's a concept that can seem a little different, but it is so powerful and beautiful. So to kind of dive into the concept of the masculine and feminine is that we do all embody both. It's not a gender specific concept. We all embody both different, what I call, parts of ourselves, where we have a masculine energy, which would be described as more of the goal oriented, the go, the do, the success, the achievement, it's like the lioness within us that sees the kill and they're going to hunt it down and get it, right? The protector, the warrior, and it's also the safety. The feminine is more of the being within us, the receiver, the nurturing, the compassionate side of ourselves, and is what I would say really rooted in love. And the feminine, to me, a woman embodied in the feminine, that is the roots of true self-love, is you coming home to your true nature in the feminine. And I teach about the 7 feminine archetypes because the feminine isn't just one thing or another. I'm masculine and feminine. I am playful and I am sensual. I am a huntress. And so it's always and, right? It's not one or the other. And it's finding the integration of the two. Because what I see a lot of today, especially for women, and this was me, is that when a woman is in her masculine, her feminine is mad at the masculine within her. Like, no, you shouldn't be in your masculine. And then when she's in her feminine, the masculine is mad at her feminine. Like, no, you can't just, be and receive. And that's not safe. That's not safe. You can't protect yourself. And there's so many so many things to dive into as far as the needs of both. But the key is the integration. I talk about how it's kind of like playing the keys on the piano, right? And that's how you dance in between both the masculine and the feminine, and you play whatever key and note that the melody calls for at any given moment. Um, and I guess to go deeper into what the masculine and feminine is it's a polarized relationship. It's a polarized relationship within us, and it's
Mm-hmm.
a polarized relationship externally. So you can think of a magnet, right? You have a positive in and a negative in. And you probably were in like your 7th grade science class and you tried to put, two magnets together, positive, negative. What did it do? It's really tight, right? You can't pull
Mm-hmm.
it apart. But if you do positive, positive or negative, negative, no matter how hard you push it together, it will never connect because there's no polarity. And that's really the power of the integration of the two. As a very high level overview of what masculine and feminine energy is, that's
Yeah. So, like, I can imagine then in a relationship, right? There's going to be conflict when you guys are both operating in your masculine energy or you're both operating in a feminine energy. So, how do we learn to recognize whether we are leading with a masculine energy and a feminine energy in our daily life? And, like, how do we learn to like integrate both of them in the right setting? Is there like
yeah.
one area that, in particular that you want to lead in a feminine or a masculine?
hmm Yeah, such good questions. Oh my gosh, I already have like so many things rolling in. But so what's really important to understand is, are you operating in love or fear? Because you
Mm,
can be operating in a masculine energy out of fear, and you can be operating in masculine energy out of love. And the
mm,
same with the feminine. And it's all understanding your trauma, your triggers. And one of my favorite
mhm.
quotes from Henry, which Henry Ammar is my husband, and Jillian knows him. And honestly, if my job was to talk about this man, I would be a billionaire because I just love him so
Aw.
much. But one of my favorite quotes that he says is that your triggers show you where you're not free.
Mm,
And so, especially understanding the wounding around your feminine energy, the wounding around your masculine energy, that's where it shows you that you're not free within the relationship with yourself and the relationship
mhm,
with your partner. And to your point of, if you're both in your masculine energy and you're both in your feminine energy, you're right. It's a depolarized relationship. Because, for example, a hunter does not go after a hunter. A hunter is not attracted to a hunter.
mm,
And a lot of women, when their core energy, which we'll get into in a second, is feminine, but they don't feel safe because the feminine craves safety, she automatically resorts to protecting herself in her masculine energy. So when she meets a man who's in his masculine energy, she's in her masculine energy. What are they going to do? They're just going to butt
repel
heads,
each other.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Repel, yeah, and butt heads because it's a competition and it's a threat, right? Where
Mm,
when you are able to get back to your own regulation, what we call walk yourself back home, and soften back into your feminine, and you have your own personal responsibility to create safety within yourself and within partnership. It is so powerful for the masculine and a masculine man in a relationship to create the safety for a woman who desires to embody the feminine. And my analogy that I use for that is a glass of water. Maybe you've heard this one, but the glass itself represents the masculine. It's the structure, it's the certainty, it's the container, and it holds the water.
mm,
And the water is the feminine, and it's very free flowing and beautiful and magnificent, and it's chaotic. It's like that water is like crazy, but it's still held in the safety of the masculine, even in the chaos.
mm,
And that's what the feminine desires, because the feminine is emotion. Like the feminine is connected to her body. She is expression. And it's not always just happy go lucky all the time. It's rage, even it's anger, it's sadness.
mm-hmm,
That is
mm-hmm.
truly expression within the feminine. And so there's so much depth in all of it. But the main role of the masculine is to create that safety for the feminine, which is really powerful.
Yeah, what's interesting is like, well, growing up, I was raised by a single mom
Yeah.
who really taught me like to protect yourself at all costs, right? Like, never rely on a man for anything in your life, like I heard it all the time. And then, I struggled in relationships, but then I became a mom when I was 18. And so it was more like I used that masculine energy to achieve and to like, I was valedictorian in my college and, I accomplished all these things while having a child. And, I persevered through that, but I carried this masculine energy. And what's really interesting when I met my husband, he was a police officer. And I think this is really interesting because, you hear a lot about like women and like uniforms and things like that. And when you're talking, I'm thinking about like, I remember like, him as this police officer. It was like this moment in time where it was like almost the first time in my life where I felt like safe and secure, and like there was a protector next to me, and it allowed me to open up and like almost like fully get vulnerable. And he was like very much in this like masculine energy, but also willing to get vulnerable with me on what he
Mhm.
had gone through, which very much I could feel that like when you were talking about the feminine and the masculine and the magnets, like I literally felt like there was a magnet between us, and we
Yeah.
just like there was no separating. And I remember coming home after meeting him and spending time with him and just telling my mom, I met the guy I'm going to marry. And she was like, okay. I'm like, no, I'm going to marry him. Like I just knew. But what's interesting though is that I hadn't done the work yet on myself. And so as we, go into our relationship more, I actually became of that masculine energy that had lived through me and got me to that point in my life, would come back up, and then we started to totally repel. And
Yeah.
so like when you're talking, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I can totally relate to that." And how like so let's talk about like how does our past affect our masculine and feminine energies, and what are some signs that there's something from our past or trauma that might be disrupting this balance between two people in a relationship, whether they're starting a relationship or been in a relationship for a long time.
Yeah, that's such a good, well, and I love that story because that actually really is the thing, like a man in uniform in the safety aspect, because
Yeah.
that is the number one desire of the feminine is safety. And it's not just people get confused sometimes on this. It's not just a physical safety.
Mm.
She needs to feel safe emotionally,
Mhm. Mhm.
mentally, sexually,
Mhm.
spiritually. It's
Yes.
that is what creates the real deep safety within her that then is drawn to that masculine energy. And you're right, it creates the magnet. And I say that the most masculine men are actually the ones who embrace their feminine, the one who allow themselves to show emotion and be open and vulnerable, while also they put the armor on in the masculine to create the safety. That's why I say it's the integration. It's the integration of all of it within ourselves, within others. And yes, our past absolutely will affect our relationships today, even if it's something that happened to you at 5 years old.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
from a trauma aspect, one thing to remember about the feminine, and this is all the men listening to this podcast, turn this part up, is that the feminine will always unconsciously test the masculine.
Mm.
She will always test the masculine to see if she is still safe. And she isn't doing it on purpose. She isn't doing it maliciously. She isn't doing it out of like, I want to harm him by testing him to see if he loves me. Her nervous system and the feminine essence within her is saying, am I still safe? Is
Mhm.
he still going to protect me from the lion?
Mhm.
And so that's when women can start to resort into that masculine energy. And that can look like, well, I'm going to control the situation because if I control it, nothing's going to hurt me.
Oh my gosh, I can so relate. Yeah.
And this is what's interesting is the masculine's number one need is freedom. So if the
Mm.
masculine's number one need is freedom, but you become controlling, guess what happens?
They repel.
Yes,
Yeah.
depolarizes the relationship. So
And then they
it's
separate from each
yep.
other.
And so that's why it's a responsibility on both of our parts is to kind of uncover and understand these activations, these triggers and our traumas. And
Mhm.
also being able to express them to our partner, because if you're aware, it's so powerful. Because like Henry, for example, there will be times that he can sense and he is aware of when I get into my masculine energy, because the number one tool in a masculine man's tool belt is awareness, because they can tell too, sometimes before we even can tell, when we're in
Mm.
like that kind of like fear-based masculine energy.
Mhm.
But I'll be, for example, doing something around the house, and then all of a sudden this song will come on that Henry puts on, because he knows it'll just like soften me back into my playful feminine. And I'm like, I know what you're doing. That's okay because I like it. But it's because sometimes we'll get into our nervous system, we'll resort back to an old memory, an old feeling, an old emotion. Even smells, sights, sounds
Mhm.
can trigger something from when we were younger, a moment when we were younger that maybe we didn't feel connected, we didn't feel chosen, because the feminine desires to feel chosen and claimed by the masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And that can all bring up the feelings of unsafety, which then we resort into, and I call it putting on the masculine shield of like, I'm going to put this shield up so I don't get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really important, and this is another Henry quote, is knowing that the same walls that we build to protect ourselves, they're the same walls that keep love out. And
Mm-hmm.
so how am I supposed to be open to letting my and inviting my husband to love me if I have this shield trying to protect myself from him the whole time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some strategies or insights that we can call on upon us when we know we are operating, let's say if we're talking to the females here, like let's say we know we are totally operating in that masculine energy and we know it, right? You can feel it and you're repelling each other in your relationship. Is there some strategies or anything you recommend that like allow you to kind of shift or tap into and embody more of that feminine energy to like call back
Yeah.
your husband or your mate or your spouse or whoever?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about my background is
Mhm.
because I work with a lot of women who are like, they are just go-getters. They're the hunter, what I would call the huntress archetype, where they also want to be out in the world and creating impact, and
Yeah.
they want the business and the success. And I talk to actually a lot of women who say, well, I'm scared because that means I'm in my masculine energy, almost like demonizing your
Mhm.
masculine, where that's not what we want to do. Like we talked at the beginning, is your masculine and feminine, and they're both powerful. You need both, because if you only were in your feminine, nothing would ever get done. And if you were only in your masculine, you're going to experience burnout, right?
Mhm.
And so something that is so beautiful is that you can be both. You can go out and do your thing in the world and then come home and soften into the feminine. I've had clients put a pink sticky note by the garage door
Mm.
before they come home, and they'll touch that, and it is their anchor to remind them like, I'm safe now. I'm safe
Mm.
to soften. And I'll have my clients repeat that like, hey, I'm safe to be soft. And it can be a whole like unraveling of what women's beliefs around femininity was, what their first experience was with feminine energy,
Mhm.
um, which is a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down. But honestly, one of the biggest things, especially if you're looking to just reconnect with your partner, is I would suggest creating a playlist that's called, like, I have one called my feminine power playlist.
I love
And
that.
when I'm leaving a huge meeting and I've been in that masculine energy, with a love-based masculine energy, and I want to soften back into my feminine and reconnect with my husband, I play this playlist and it gets me back into just that playful, softened, joyful state. Because if I come home and I meet him in my masculine, then there's a fight at home. There's a threat
Mhm.
at home. There's competition at home.
Mhm.
And that's not to say that it doesn't go vice versa, because also we also need to remember that our kings need to be able to come home and take off their armor. And that's
Yeah.
where a lot of women struggle, is when a man steps into his more feminine energy, they're like kind of freaking out like, what's happening? I don't And it's not attractive, because then you're both
Yeah.
in this feminine energy. But
Yeah.
this is the key, is the feminine just wants to know her warrior's going to come back, knowing that he's not going to be in that state for long. He just needs to be able to take off that armor. And that's when we get to step into our power and hold them in those moments to re-energize him so he can go back out into the world, put that armor back on, and knowing that he's going to come back.
Yeah.
Um,
You know what I think I see too, is like, men can tend to have to play that masculine role in society. So then when they come home, if they do feel safe to take their armor off, they take it off, but then they don't put back on the armor for their spouse, right? And so then there is this kind of unbalance between that energy, I think, as well on like a masculine side. Like we need him to show up for the family as this, not just in the feminine energy. Is there something like, how do men recognize that aspect and then, vice versa, like tap into their masculine in that role of husband at home as well, even though they do need time to take off their armor as well?
Yeah, and it's so interesting. So Henry and I work with a lot of couples, and this is
Yeah.
something that is a big topic, right? And
Yeah.
because both, if you look at both situations, you have, for example, let's take a scenario. We have
Mhm.
stay-at-home mom who
Mhm.
is with the kids all day. And
Mhm.
it is like you've been thrown up on, you've been pooped on, all of the things that a mom goes through.
And you're
Because
running your home,
yes, you're
right?
running the home. And then the husband is out in the world and he is working and fighting and providing, bringing home, the food. He's out there. He killed the
Hunting. Yeah.
buffalo, killed the
Mhm.
buffalo to literally
Yeah.
bring it back. So then he brings it back and puts it on the, table. And so then they're both there. They're both standing there like, okay, your turn, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so it really does take this awareness and honestly remembering that you're on the same team
Mm.
always,
Mhm.
and being able to communicate in a way that you both communicate the needs of like, what does that look like? Envisioning what would be the best case scenario for both of you when he gets home. Because sometimes as women, like we want like, hey, I need a break. Like you're home now and it's your turn. You take the kids without the realization of, man,
Mhm.
who knows what he just went through out at work, who
Yeah.
he had to, what fight he had to put up with, or maybe who he had to fire and he had a really hard day too. And it's, what does that look like? And creating your own framework almost and structure. And this is where to me it's so powerful to have the leadership of a masculine man to
Mhm.
say, here we go, this is the plan. What do
Mhm.
you think? That's one of
Yeah.
the most attractive things to me, especially with Henry, is he'll come up and be like, okay, here's the plan, this is what we're doing, what do you think?
Mhm. Mhm.
And he still is he's leading us in our relationship, he's leading us in life, and he's still honoring my opinion, my thoughts, and we talk about it. So it's really having that balance is hard, a word that is hard to say, because really, who has balance in anything? It's what is our game plan?
Yeah.
One of the first things that Henry and I did on our honeymoon is we said, okay, we're going to learn how to fight. And we just created our little framework because I'm a processor.
Mhm. Mhm. Me
And
too.
there's a difference between processing and avoiding.
Yeah.
And I'm a processor. And Henry and that masculine spirit is like, no, let's fix it now. Like, I want to tackle this now. And
Totally relate.
like, yeah. So it's what is and
Mhm.
for him, he's like, okay, I'm going to honor you. I want to give you space and time. I just need to know you're going to come back to this.
Yep.
Right. And so as
Yep.
long as he knows we're coming back and I say, yes, I'm going to come back to this conversation. Let me just process for a little bit. Let's meet. And that's where that communication is just so powerful. So creating that plan and agreement and teamwork of when they come home,
Mhm.
or when he comes home is so powerful.
Yeah, I actually really love the idea of like having the pink sticky note on the door too that you mentioned earlier, because I think, a lot of times nowadays too, there's two people going into the workforce, out of the home working, and then you get back and you, like you're saying, like you're in one of those energies and they might be repelling each other every time you get home.
Yeah.
So how do you learn to like release that energy and tap into the one you want to show up in, for your relationship,
Yeah.
and make that work? I think that's super important. And then the other thing you said, what, and I can relate to in our relationship as well, is like we were the same, as in he would want to fix things and I need to process. And a lot of that actually stemmed from our past as well. Like my husband had a fear of abandonment, from his wounds, right? And I was like, oh, I don't matter. My needs don't matter. It's like, so we would just take that, like, repel, and it would just like, it would cause this huge conflict. And so, yeah, we would have to develop, I love that you developed a framework.
Yeah.
I'm actually curious though, like, what did you guys literally just sit down and be like, okay, this is what I need. This is what I need in this situation. And then, like, here's the process we're going to take every time that we enter into that conflict.
Yeah, because here's the
Okay.
thing is if you wait, Dr. Bruce Perry is amazing, and
Mm-hmm.
his something that in anything, any life in situation, any relationship is remember that you want to regulate, then relate, and then you reason.
Oh, I
Because
love that.
if you are dysregulated trying to create your game plan, have you ever tried to reason with a dysregulated person? Yeah, like well, we all have in a fight, and
Oh,
it doesn't
yeah. You're
escalate,
not
right?
getting anywhere.
What if
Mm-hmm.
we tried having the conversation when we're regulated? So then we know what the game plan is. We have that in
Mm-hmm.
place. So it's like it's a commitment of okay, I have a responsibility within myself to show up in this way, even in this tear right now in the relationship, so that we can get to repair.
Mhm.
And so creating that structure, that it's kind of like
Mhm.
the masculine structure, and the certainty even for the feminine is really, really powerful. So yeah, having that conversation when you're regulated, and it doesn't have to be heavy, or it can actually be playful. We totally sat on our bed on our honeymoon. We're like, okay, this is how we're going to fight. And this is what I need, because this is how I handle conflict. And this is what I need. And it's because it's not one or the other, is
Mhm.
remembering that both have needs, and this is relationship, and this is partnership, and meeting the needs of both. The more embodied a woman is in her feminine, which I think is the greatest gift she can give her husband, a man totally embodied in his masculine is the greatest gift that he can give to his wife. When you show up in that, there's a responsibility for both of you to do your part, and also a responsibility to show up for the other person. But when you embody these energies, you automatically have the desire of like, oh, I want to show up for him in this.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's the magnet, right? So
Mhm.
yeah,
I
we
love
literally created a framework.
Yeah, I love that regulate, relate, and reason. I think that is so huge. We had to definitely learn how to regulate for sure. What is something that you do or practice in order to regulate, whether that's in the moment or taking a pause or whatever, so that you can relate and then know that you're on the same team again rather than feeling like you're not?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. For me personally, there's a lot of different things, but even if that's me stepping away to take a walk, breath is a big thing for me, which just breath work in general regulates your nervous system. So going out to just
Mhm.
breathe. The car is actually a very like sacred space to me. And I think for a lot of moms where it's just like,
Mm.
it's quiet. I get to
Mhm.
be here. So I'll go in the car and I listen to music.
Mm.
And because music will really break the pattern a lot of the time to get you back to regulation, because it allows you to lift the cloud of, oh, this was my part in this,
Mm.
and owning that, you do have a responsibility and that you do have a part in it, and seeing the needs of your partner as well. And the cool thing about the feminine, and this is within all of us, is the feminine is about being. And it's not just like I'm just being here doing nothing. It's who am I being?
Mhm.
Who am I being in my relationship? Who am I being in the world? Who am I being to my kids? It's the essence of who we are. So but yeah, some of the things that I do is definitely music, and definitely just a pause, and kind of like a sacred space to just regulate my nervous system in that way. So
I love that.
yeah, and it's unique. The thing is too is that feminine energy is unique to every different woman. It's not like here's your cookie cutter feminine energy, there you go. And this is how you're supposed to regulate your nervous system. It's different for everyone. So finding your unique way to walk yourself home is what we call it. Walk
Mm.
yourself back home so that you can have a regulated conversation. And this is another thing, because we teach about like masculine and feminine communication, right?
Mm.
Because like,
Mhm.
men and
Yeah.
women communicate differently. And I'll give you an example
Yes.
really quickly. So let's say you were to call a friend. We were talking about one of your friends earlier on the
Mhm.
before we started the podcast. If you were to call
Yes.
her and you're like, "Hey, how's it going? Like, what's new?" And she just like, "Nothing." You're like, "Oh, cool. What'd you do today?" Not much."
Yeah.
"Yeah, you're doing good." "Yep." "Okay, you need anything?" "Nope." "All right,
Mhm.
hang up." What would you say? You say
Well,
something's wrong with her,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where a man can call his buddy and say, "Hey, what's up, man? What are you doing?" Not much." "Cool. You got anything planned today?" "No."
Okay.
"Alright, you doing good?" "Yep." "Alright, cool. You need anything?" "No, I'm good." Hang up the phone, he's like, "Oh, I love that guy."
Yeah.
That's that's just how men communicate differently than women, because
So
women
true.
bond over the story and the expression. The feminine is expression, and so we want to be able to express in that way, and, so we communicate differently, and being able to, um, going back to my original point, is being able to communicate from a masculine standpoint. If a man really wants to make a conversation successful, is pre-framing is always better than reframing. And
Mm.
pre-framing this by, hey babe, we're on the same thing, everything's going to be great, we're going to be okay, there's something I really want to talk to you about. That automatically creates a safety within her nervous system to say, okay, everything's going to be okay. Let's now dive in, right? He's
Mhm.
not going my
Mhm.
protector is not going to leave me. He's not going to run away. And we, as women, we still can use that same sort of conversation and communication as well.
Mhm.
Um, Usually the feminine communication is the invitation.
Mm.
She invites and inspires. She doesn't control and force.
Mm.
Okay. So it's, babe, I would love it if we could talk about this. Or I love it when you plan a date night for us. Or something that, boosting the masculine spirit is like, it's so hot. We
Mhm.
should delete and plan this.
Mhm.
Like I'll do it to Henry and the same thing. He'll be like, I know what you're doing.
That's so cute. So, like, what do you do or say in the situation where it's like, "Oh, like, what's your day look like today?" And they're like, I'm working," like, or something, like, really simple that you're like, "Well, that is not what I was looking for. Like, I wanted more texture and, like, depth to our conversation. I wanted to connect," you know?
Yeah,
What would you say in that situation? Or,
yeah.
like, "How's your day?" "It's busy," you know?
It's busy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to our communication of like
Yeah.
women bond over the expression, where men are just more like to the point.
Yeah.
And it's just straight to the point. The masculine is point A to point B. It's, and actually just to bring a full circle in the description of masculine feminine energy
Mhm.
is look at the reproductive anatomy of a man versus a woman. It's straight. Point A to
Mm.
point B. It's like get the job done, I'm going this way. Where women, it's circular. It's oval.
Mhm.
We live in seasons, we live in cycles, it's flow, it's we want to
Mm.
express, right? So it's even the same in communication. And Allison Armstrong, I love her. She's amazing, especially when it comes to relationships. But in those types of situations, we are expecting him to be what she would call a hairy woman, which
Oh,
is that's not how he communicates, right? And so sometimes
totally.
it's like a tortured thing for him to be like, well, I'm in hunt mode. I'm going, I'm doing like, right?
Mhm.
And where what you can do in that situation is finding that from a space that wants to receive it almost like, and that's why the girlfriends is a great space. Here's another tool though. This one I love, especially if you're wanting to communicate and
Mhm.
express something to your partner, is that Henry and I do this, which is from Alison Armstrong, and it's called holding the trash can. Where I want to, sometimes I just need to come home and express. And the
Mhm.
masculine is a fixer. As within 30 seconds of you telling a masculine partner something, they have 20 solutions in 30 seconds.
Mhm.
And that's not really what you want. You want to be able to express it. So what I'll do is I go to Henry and I'm like, babe, can you hold the trash can for me? And he's like, great. Yes. What
Yeah.
size do you need? I'm like, I need a dumpster today, or I need like the bathroom small size,
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
And so then what that does is it flips off his fixer brain. And all he does is he holds the trash can for me to pour into. And I
Mm.
just go and I express. And it
Mhm.
helps him and his nervous system and his
Mhm.
masculine spirit just kind of be like, okay, I'm just holding space. I'm
Yep.
here. I'm not fixing anything. I'm just holding it. And then when I'm done, he says, okay, great. Would you like my input or do you want us to tie it up and throw it away? And a lot of the time I'll ask for his input, but if anything, it just helps me express because to me, that's connection. The more I'm expressing, my feminine spirit says, oh, he loves me. He's connected
Mhm.
because I'm expressing
Mhm.
to him. And right. And so it's just understanding the two differently is really, really key. So,
That is so good. I love that, holding the trash can. I'm like, I come home from work a lot and I'm like, my shifts are long, 12 and a half hours, and I see a lot of trauma, right? And
yeah,
so some days I do, I'm like, hey, I just need you to sit on the couch and listen and that's it. Like,
yeah,
I just need to get it out and then I'm fine. Then
exactly.
we're good. But yeah, having that space and being able to verbalize it. It also, like, he is totally a fixer, same. So he's like, looking for how he's gonna, help me in
He's
the
like,
situation. So if
yeah,
I just tell him how, then he's like, perfect, I can do that. I'll sit right here for you.
yeah.
Like,
Yep, you can fix it by just holding the trash can. And that's what is really cool is it's when you know the dynamic of each of the energies, right?
So
That's
good.
how you can interact and play with what you need and having those needs met while also making sure that your partner, his needs are being met and it doesn't activate them in a certain way. Cause that alone, just hold the
Yeah.
trash can. He's like, okay, cool. I know what I'm doing. I know the
Yeah.
game plan.
And I
Right.
think
So,
I
and
think this edge Yeah, I think this education is really also just important to be aware of and be mindful of, and everybody to know, because it also, like, helps people understand, like, there's nothing wrong with your husband or you in the situation. It's just like that's how we are created, right? And so having that understanding that they're just operating in the way that they were created and you're in that zone, and I think is super helpful. There's one question I wanted to go back, that
okay.
is keeps coming up for me is like, you know, how do we know for sure if we're operating from love-based or fear-based? Like, is there
Mm,
something that's happening in our bodies? Like, how do we become aware of, like, is this coming from a love base or is this coming from a fear base?
yeah, absolutely. That's, again, we could go for days on this. And that's why I love the archetypes,
Mm,
because in all of the archetypes, for an example, is that there's a love-based version and a fear-based version. So I'll give you a
mm,
couple examples. So
okay.
for example, the maiden archetype. Her in her love-based state, she's playful. She's like, it's like that inner child, that wide-eyed wonder of the world. She walks into the room, she's smiling, she has that bright light. Like that is the maiden in a love-based state.
Mm,
Now, the maiden in a fear-based state, she has a hard time saying no. She's prone to people pleasing.
mm,
She has a lack of boundaries. She can be seen as naive, right?
mhm,
And has low self-worth. So
mm,
that's the fear-based side activation of, I am seeking connection in a certain way. And when I was younger, I most likely felt as though I was losing connection if I was seen as playful, or maybe I was seen as immature, and that'll
mhm,
disconnect me from my primary caretaker, whatever that might look like. So
mhm.
that's one example. The mother archetype, which I'm gonna give three. I'm gonna give that, the mother, and the lover. And the
Okay.
mother, so in the love-based state, the mother she's nurturing, she's compassionate. Like you think of a mother, that's exactly like the essence of a mother. That's exactly what she is. And she's creative. And you don't have to have children to be in that mother energy. Just as a woman can create life within her, she
Mhm,
creates externally. She's
mm,
creative with art and expression, and it's a really beautiful energy. Now, the mother in a fear-based state, though, she can become critical and controlling.
mm,
You can think of the
mhm,
mom who sees the toddler about to go down the step and is like, "Oh no, I
mhm,
have to do this for you because I don't want you to get hurt. So if I control the situation, everything's going to be okay."
mm,
Right?
mhm,
She's self-sacrificing to a fault. She gives so much to everybody else, but leaves nothing to herself or for
mhm,
herself. She's
mhm,
disconnected from her body, her sensuality, because she is just so giving all the time in that aspect. And
mm,
giving out of fear of losing connection more so than giving out of love, right? And then the lover is extremely connected to her body. She isn't connected to her sexuality, her sensuality, all of those beautiful parts that a lot of women kind of push away.
mhm,
But in a love-based, beautiful sense, knowing that it's for herself, not for anybody else. She's connected to pleasure, and not just sexually, but just the pleasure of life, sights, sounds, meals.
mm.
And to me is truly the root of self-love, because she loves every part of her body. She's completely connected to her body, gives so much gratitude. Which, can you imagine if all of the women of the world
Yeah.
love their bodies, right? When we're
Mhm.
taught otherwise, and
Yeah.
we're supposed to look this way and whatnot.
Mhm,
But the fear-based version of the lover is that she uses her sexuality and her body to gain power over others. She's
mm.
prone to sexual trauma bonds,
Yes.
right? Yeah, she
Yeah.
seeks validation for her looks.
Yep. Yep.
So those are some examples of how like, am I doing this out of fear? And sometimes if you're questioning it, even just checking in with your intuition of pausing, taking a
Mhm,
breath, and asking, because your subconscious will always answer the question that you ask, whether it's positive or negative. And so usually asking a question that will lead to a positive answer is what you want, but asking yourself, like,
mhm,
am I operating out of love or fear right now? What
mm.
is my
So good.
intention? And that's one thing that we tell our couples is your communication to your partner with whatever you're saying or about to say. What is your intention by saying that? Is your intention to hurt your partner? Or is your intention to love your partner with what you're
Mhm.
about to say?
So good. I love that so much, and so good to be so aware of that. I think that's so key in asking yourself the questions.
Yeah.
How did you so you have the Queen Collective, which I want everybody to hear about. And you're also doing like your Calling in Your King program. Like you're doing so much. Like how did you get into this work?
Yeah.
What inspired you to do this?
Oh, thank you so much for asking that. We all have our journey, right? And this
Yeah.
is basically something that I created because it's what I needed 6 years ago.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
for those, or a lot of people don't know my backstory, but I was in an abusive relationship for 11 years. And
Mm.
prior to that, I told you I grew up on a farm. I was a cowgirl. I also played college basketball. So my value and my worth was so tied up in performance.
Mhm.
And if I didn't perform, then my worth was
I can
non-existent,
I
right?
can
And
relate.
not being
Yeah.
able to, and I emotional override completely. Like, no, I
Mhm.
got this, rub some dirt on it, I'm fine. And that led me into this I lacked boundaries and being able to say no, and it led me into this abusive relationship. And this relationship ended with this person who was supposed to be my safety, who was supposed to be my certainty, pulled a gun on me and my sleeping 5-year-olds, and my 18-month-old was in the other room. And he had it 2 feet in front of my face and told me that he was going to kill me.
Oh,
And then
wow.
he stepped back and put it to his head, and it was directly in line with my sleeping 5-year-old. And I always tell people that it was the scariest moment of my life, and at the same time, it was the most safe I ever felt, because it was I literally felt protected in that moment. Of it was finally the reason, I quote unquote reason, I needed to leave,
Yeah.
because I stayed in the abuse for so long. And I asked myself the question, after getting out of this, fast forward, because we're all good, we're all healthy, we're all safe and thriving
Yeah.
now. But I asked myself, it's not the trauma of solely the gun. Why did I stay for 11 years? Like, it made me ask really deep questions, and I went back and back and back. And then I naturally, as I was thrown out into the dating world in my 30s, I noticed that my body and my energy, like, I crave certain things that I never craved before. And I was like, I really want to dive into this feminine energy thing. I really have pushed it away my whole life.
Yeah.
And so that led me down this path. And then also trauma and understanding my behavior patterns and why I acted certain ways, or I would respond a certain way when I'm like, that just does not make sense to me. That's not who I am. And then I realized that all of our behaviors are adaptive. There's no bad behaviors. Our nervous system is simply trying to keep us safe. And that's exactly what I was doing the entire time. So when all of that happened, I honestly, it was whatever you believe in, I believe in God. And God really just gifted me this gift of the Queen Collective and bringing this to women, because it's what I had experienced. I had always helped women with whether I was coaching them in fitness or other things, but it didn't feel congruent. And then this was just laid out in front of me, and it just took off, and it resonates so deeply. And I understand why, because it literally changed my life. And now I am in the most beautiful, amazing, connected, passionate relationship I couldn't even dream or create one better than the one that we have. And I'm so grateful for the man that I have in my life and the way that he shows up. And it's because of doing this inner work. Like, I was able to call him in because I was able to dive deep into this. And now it's what I'm helping these women with in calling in your king, because to call in a king, you first have to become the queen. So it's really about becoming that for yourself.
That's so good, Terrin. I love that so much. And it's like, I see you doing it, and, it really allows me to understand, like, hey, I need to be doing that more. Like, when I see you, even like on social media and stuff, I'm like, I need to embody that more in my own life. And so thanks for showing up, and thanks for getting vulnerable about it, because it really does. When we can see it like outside of ourselves, it helps us reflect on the things that we need to show up in, and so I appreciate what you do. I truthfully love learning about it. How can other people find you and learn more about what you do? Because I think this is just really powerful and transformative work.
Oh, you're so kind. And I just have to say, for anyone listening who has not met Jillian in person, she is such a light. And
Aw.
so many people that I know have spoken so many beautiful things about you, and you're literally the embodiment of an angel on earth. So I'm so grateful
Aw.
for you and what you are doing in the world. Yeah, everyone can find me at the Queen Collective, and collective is spelled with a K, and because we call it the QK for Queen and King. And that's on Instagram. We do most of our stuff through Instagram. And then Henry and I are actually launching masculineandfeminine.com for couples and relationships. And yeah, so those are the two main places that you can find us. And we run all of our programs through there, and retreats and events and all of that stuff. So yeah.
Well, I cannot wait to hug you in person. I'm hoping that's going to be soon. This has been so fun. Thank you for coming on here. Thank you for sharing your personal stories and all your insights. I feel like this has just been so powerful. Please reach out to us and let us know your thoughts. If there's anything we can help you with, please reach out. I know Terrin, you are just so lovely, like responding on Instagram and all of that. So thank you for showing up for everyone.
Thank you. And thank you
Yeah.
for all that you were doing.
Of course. To our listeners, we hope you found this conversation as inspiring and empowering as we did. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review. Stay connected to us for more insightful discussions. Until next time, keep striving for healing and living life without secrets. Thank you for listening. Hey there, it's Jillian from Life Without Secrets. Ever feel like you and your partner aren't quite on the same page? Well, you're not alone, and that's exactly why I created our latest issue of Truthful magazine. It's packed with insights and stories about bridging that gap and finding a deeper connection. We're diving into real conversations about needs, feelings, and how honest dialogue can rekindle that closeness that you've been missing. Why not explore this together? Go grab your free copy right now at lifewithoutsecrets.com and turn those pages into shared moments. Can't wait for you to dive in and share your thoughts with me.